In the words of Aerosmith, rock stars are often living on the edge, these guys especially. Here are some rock gods who nearly ascended to actual heaven. Part of the wild, real-life story of Alice Cooper is how eager the raspy-voiced musician was to incorporate death-defying stunts into his live performances. As the Schools Out singer once told Entertainment Weekly, he wanted to grab the audience's attention by making them worry about his safety on stage, even comparing the resulting thrill to that of a tiger tamer or a tightrope walker. Cooper explained, "I always wanted that in our show. What they're seeing could be the last night of Alice Cooper. But if you tempt fate enough, you might meet it." And that's exactly what happened to Cooper. One fateful night in 1988 at Wembley Stadium came close to being the rock star's last. The trick that nearly did Cooper in was a gallows setup using a harness and a thick piano wire that stopped a foot above his head to protect him from the rope noose around his neck, and it wasn't new. He'd actually been performing it for 15 years at that point, though not at every show. It was a gimmick that he concocted with the help of magician James Randi, and it had always gone off without a hitch. But at that show, the protective wire snapped.
As soon as I felt it more pressure than it should be, I snapped my head back and it went over like that.
Cooper walked away with his life in a serious rope burn. Even so, Cooper, ever the showman, picked up his performance after he recovered. He didn't give up the trick either. He continued to do a safer version moving forward. In a 2010 interview with the New York Times, Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones reminisced, with a smile no less, that his most spectacular electrocution happened in Sacramento. On top of the shocking, pun intended, implication that this sort of mishap has happened to the musician more than once, it's also worth noting that the incident in question, which took place at the Sacramento Memorial Auditorium on December 3, 1965, was one of the many times Richards came close to meeting his maker. As the story goes, the band was performing, eerily enough, the last time, and as the then 21-year-old Richards leaned into his microphone to sing his part, the neck of his electric guitar came into contact with an ungrounded mic. According to the account of a fan who was present at the concert, the surge was powerful enough to send Richards' body flying backwards. The fan told Far Out, "I thought he was dead. I was horrified. We all were." As Richards regained consciousness at a nearby hospital, he recalled overhearing a doctor say, "Well, they either wake up or they don't."
Nobody wants to get old, but they don't want to die young either.
Richards has had enough brushes with death to fill a list of his own, including almost being shot at the Altamont Festival in 1969, falling asleep with a lit cigarette in his mouth and almost burning to death inside his home in 1973, and being bonked on the head with some heavy books in 1998, which caused him to fall and break 3 ribs, forcing the Stones to reschedule their tour. Longtime Poison frontman Bret Michaels apparently never noticed when his band's heyday faded away because his hard partying continued well into the 90s. Sadly, it all came to a head in 1994 when he wrapped his Ferrari around a telephone pole and nearly died as a result. He wound up with several broken bones, including his jaw, his nose, several fingers, and a few ribs. In an interview with Houston Press, the Every Rose Has Its Thorn singer claimed he was heading to an after-party after a rager with actor Chris Penn when the accident occurred. He said, "I was just hauling ass and lost control of the car. That's pretty much it. And just thank God that I didn't hurt anyone but myself." REM's 1995 Monster Tour took a toll on the band, to say the least. By the time it wrapped up, 4 members had undergone surgery for various health issues. The first and most serious incident happened to drummer Bill Berry. The band was 90 minutes into a set in Switzerland when Berry felt a throbbing headache coming on. He later told the Los Angeles Times, "It felt like a bowling ball hit me in the head. There wasn't any warning. I was just singing the falsetto part on tongue when it happened." He kept playing to avoid causing a scene, but collapsed moments later. Drummer Joey Peters from the opening act Grant Lee Buffalo filled in and finished the show while Berry was taken care of. Fortunately for Berry, Switzerland is home to some of the world's foremost brain surgeons.
REM drummer Bill Berry is in a hospital after suffering a ruptured brain aneurysm.
Doctors found a burst aneurysm as well as a second one waiting to happen and performed a life-saving craniotomy. Days later, Berry was recovering. About 5 years after Pearl Jam first hit the music scene, the band was on tour in New Zealand when they very nearly lost their lead singer, Eddie Vedder. An avid surfer, Vedder made the most out of the days between performances by inviting his friend, New Zealand local songwriter Tim Finn, to go surfing with him. As luck would have it, the pair found themselves at a beach where the wind was particularly strong, but Vedder wasn't intimidated. They soon learned their lesson, though, when a powerful riptide caught Vedder and carried him 250 feet from the shoreline. Had it not been for the timely intervention of the lifeguards that day, Vedder would have drowned at sea. He gave the guards who saved his life a quick thank you and no more, which was admittedly a bit of a letdown for them considering his celebrity. Senior lifeguard Eric Davis told the New York Times, "We were volunteers operating on a shoestring budget and a donation would have helped us along." That wasn't Vedder's only brush with death.
I have to get reacquainted with the ocean.
In 2001, he and some friends found themselves stranded off the coast of Maui after their boat capsized. They were eventually rescued by a passing boat.
I seriously didn't know if I was going to get out of that one.
That time, Vedder donated $70,000 to the boat captain, although it wasn't until 15 years later when the captain needed money for medical expenses. Almost 30 years later, in 2024, Vedder spoke of yet another near-death experience involving unspecified members of Pearl Jam, an undisclosed ailment that caused them to cancel some upcoming shows in Europe. Speaking with Billboard, Vedder reflected, "You just realize how precious this life is."
As you know, the rock and roll business is a pretty tough business, and, without a sense of humor, it's very easy to go right down.
There's no doubt that guitarist Ace Frehley had made a significant contribution to the rise of Kiss, the American metal rock musicians who made worldwide waves in the later half of the 1970s. Though Frehley died in October 2025, he also had a close brush with death in December 1976. As part of the promotional tour for their fifth studio album, Rock and Roll Over, the band did a show in Lakeland, Florida, one that nearly became Frehley's last when 220 volts surged from his guitar through his body as he was walking down a metal staircase. Frehley shed more light on the incident in a 2024 Facebook post, writing, "I started descending on the railing and it wasn't grounded properly."
It was a very shocking experience.
Frehley attributed his survival to the fact that he fell backward instead of forward, landing on the ground 20 feet below, which could have been catastrophic. After reportedly seeing his life flash before his eyes and taking 15 minutes to recover in their dressing room, Frehley returned to the stage, despite having total numbness in his right hand. Speaking with the Morton Report, he recalled, "I said, I can't play. Then the fans started chanting my name and I finished the show. I don't know how I even did it. I guess it was all adrenaline." In the vein of turning misfortune into art, Kiss's 1977 song Shock Me was based on Frehley's experience. Five Finger Death Punch's lead vocalist Ivan Moody has been very public about his journey through alcoholism and sobriety. In 2013, he shared that his substance issues nearly resulted in him getting kicked out of the band. Since then, the singer worked hard to curb his excessive drinking, an effort that on one unforgettable occasion left him unresponsive for around 3.5 minutes. In an interview with Metal Hammer, Moody talked about his attempt to quit drinking cold turkey, recalling, "I've been on a bender for about 2 years and I'd gone 4 days without drinking in an entire year, which is ridiculous. So for 4 days, I locked myself inside the house, and the 4th day my daughter came over and I went to hand her a glass of water, and that's all I remember." Moody hadn't prepared properly and nearly paid for it with his life. He explained,
And I wasn't there. I died for like almost 2.5 minutes.
Moody claimed to have seen the afterlife during those minutes. He described it as a blue haze and a feeling of being on the edge, but he didn't surrender. He attributes his survival to his daughter, who was with him at the time, remembering, "The next thing I know, I was laying there with 2 paddles on my chest and my daughter was crying in my face." The video for Five Finger Death Punch's 2022 single The Tragic Truth features a reenactment of Moody's near-death experience. And as of July 2025, Moody said that he's been sober for 7 years. Brian Johnson left AC/DC in 2016 because his hearing had deteriorated so drastically. In his memoir, The Lives of Brian, he explained that doctors told him to quit immediately or risk permanently losing his hearing. But his hearing loss wasn't due to his years standing too close to the speakers and playing in a heavy metal band. Rather, it was his love for racing. In a 2014 interview with Howard Stern, Johnson confessed, "I got it from sitting in a race car too long without earplugs." Little did he know that just 3 years later, one of those race cars would put his life at risk in a totally different way. In 2017, Johnson drove a vintage Austin 835 in the Celebrity Challenge Trophy race of the Silverstone Classic, which some regard as the largest classic car racing festival in the world. During the race, Johnson's car completely rolled over. Miraculously, Johnson didn't sustain any serious injuries. With that said, this wasn't his first car accident. In the 1970s, an 18-year-old Johnson was trapped inside his friend's burning car after a serious collision. He feared for his life, especially after rescuers pulled out his friend who was driving, but not him. Johnson was obviously saved and walked away with nothing but a burn on his hand. When people think of Dave Grohl, the first thing that comes to mind is likely Foo Fighters, the band he founded after his stint as Nirvana's drummer. What people might not know, though, is that he's also been a longtime surfing enthusiast. In a 2018 interview with GQ, Grohl said, "I started surfing on the East Coast, which some people don't consider to be surfing. Grohl has fond memories of days spent at his North Carolina beach house riding 4-foot waves and drinking beer. But things hadn't always been smooth sailing, or surfing, for the rock star, who talked about a frightening experience while attempting to surf with some friends in Santa Cruz, California. According to Grohl, he borrowed a 14-foot longboard with no leash and just started riding. Unfortunately, he picked the worst time to do so. Grohl recalled, "I lost the board up against the cliffs and I was just caught in a set of waves that seemed to go on for 5 or 10 minutes. He remembered panic setting in almost immediately and thinking that he was about to die." Realizing his predicament, though, the singer decided to just start paddling to safety instead of being paralyzed by fear, sharing, "I knew that if I panicked, I probably would die, so I kept it cool." In 1981, singer-songwriter Eric Clapton had a substance abuse problem involving both alcohol and drugs, which also put a tremendous strain on his finances. But Clapton wouldn't become fully aware of the extent of his dangerous predicament until March 13, 1981, when he was 7 shows into a 57-date U.S. tour. As Clapton shared in his autobiography, "I collapsed in agony as I came off stage in Madison, Wisconsin. Doctors found that Clapton had 5 bleeding ulcers, one of which was the size of a small orange. It was a literal life or death situation, as one of the ulcers was ready to rupture right beside his pancreas. After some time, he was discharged from the hospital. Just days later, he was involved in a car accident that left him with multiple injuries. Clapton took this as a sign that he should cut back on his drinking and drug use, but his resolve didn't stick. The following year, he went into rehab and eventually made it to the other side in a state of good health. According to Clapton, his biggest regret from that period of his life wasn't the toll it took on him, but the toll he took on those around him. He wrote, "That's always the worst part about an addict or an alcoholic. People are dragged along, and sometimes they go down before the principal character." In 1996, Depeche Mode lead singer Dave Gahan came close to dying, but what set his brush with death apart was what happened immediately after he regained consciousness. That's when he found himself under arrest, which has to be among the most unsettling things that can happen to you moments after a near-death experience.
If I was high, I was out of mind, and therefore I felt like I was out of sight, and therefore I felt that it didn't matter somehow.
Following a drug overdose, Gahan was medically dead for 2 minutes. Sharing his story with German newspaper Bild, Gahan described the whole thing as one would describe an out-of-body episode, recalling, "I was floating underneath the ceiling and could observe exactly what was happening underneath me. Paramedics were running around my body and tried to save me. I screamed that I wasn't actually lying down there, but above them." When Gahan opened his eyes, he realized that he'd been handcuffed to the hospital bed, with officers around him serving him a warrant for possession of cocaine and heroin. It was this incident that shocked him into sobriety and likely saved the band as well. Speaking to The Guardian in 2007, Gahan had a profound reflection about his ordeal, saying, "In the 2 minutes my heart stopped, this humongous voice inside of me went, 'This is wrong, like I don't get to choose when this is over.' It scared the shit out of me." For Black Sabbath bassist Geezer Butler, the reminder life gave him of his mortality was related to an otherwise ordinary activity, eating. Speaking to Kerrang! In 2020, Butler shared how their band's 1995 tour was sent to a screeching halt after he was stricken with life-threatening food poisoning. At the time, Black Sabbath had gone back to performing at clubs to get closer to audiences again after a lifetime of playing arenas. But during one gig, Butler, an avowed vegan, suddenly felt horribly sick to his stomach, to the point where he could barely stand, much less perform. He recalled, "I was leaning up against the amps and I think people just thought I was pissed off playing there. I started hallucinating at one point and someone just called an ambulance and rushed me to hospital." Butler admitted that at the time he really thought his number was up. He was rushed into the ICU and attached to a drip. He eventually got better, but the band had to cancel the remaining engagements to give him sufficient time to recover. Singer-songwriter Nick Lowe has had plenty of commercial successes throughout his long and prolific career, but much of it would never have happened had he not survived his brush with death in 1969, just 3 years after his professional debut. While performing alongside his rock band Brinsley Schwarz at the Marquee Club in London, Lowe, who was just 20 years old at the time, handled an ungrounded microphone while holding his bass guitar. According to an account of the incident in The Show Won't Go On, the most shocking, bizarre, and historic deaths of performers on stage, the surge of electricity sent the musician crashing into the amplifiers. Because he still had both his bass guitar and the microphone in his hands, no one could approach him and save him. Oddly enough, what ultimately saved Lowe's life was a miscalculated rescue attempt by their keyboardist Bob Andrews. Aiming to kick the microphone from Lowe's hands, Andrews' boot smashed into the electrocuted performer's ribcage, effectively kick-starting his heart. After regaining consciousness at the hospital, Lowe quietly slipped out and made his way to the bar across the street from the venue where he'd had the accident. He found his bandmates there mourning his death over drinks. Needless to say, his sudden arrival gave them a good fright. They actually thought his ghost had appeared before them. While at the peak of their popularity in the early 1970s, glam rock band Slade suffered a devastating blow. On July 4, 1973, drummer Don Powell and his fiancée Angela Morris were in a horrific accident while riding in the musician's Bentley. The car crashed into a tree and a brick wall, sending both passengers flying out of the vehicle. Morris died immediately, but Powell was saved by the timely intervention of passing nurses, who promptly called for medical assistance. An ambulance happened to be in the area and rushed to the scene. In Powell's autobiography, "Look What I'd Done, My Life in Slade," he wrote, "The nurses were holding my head together as it was split open. It was a miracle that I survived." He was taken to the hospital where he was in surgery for hours, followed by 5 days in a coma. Even though he regained consciousness, the state he was in left the band's musical future in question. Slade's lead vocalist and rhythm guitarist Noddy Holder told Louder, "Don survived, but his memory was wrecked. His taste and smell had gone. He still can't taste or smell anything now, in fact. We didn't know how the band would carry on." Powell's recovery was long and difficult. For the next 2 years, his bandmates helped him get fit enough to play live again, refusing to replace him with another drummer. Sleaze metal champions Motley Crue were near the height of their popularity in 1987. The group had just released their fourth album, Girls, 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 to multi-platinum success, and had embarked on an equally successful and completely debauched world tour in support of the album's release. Of course, things behind the scenes were a little less glamorous than those corny 80s hair metal videos would have you believe. Nikki Sixx, the Crue's founder, bassist, and chief songwriter, was battling a vicious heroin addiction at the time, which he detailed in his 2007 book, The Heroin Diaries, A Year in the Life of a Shattered Rock Star. But one incident stands out in particular and has gone on to become one of the most notable stories in rock history. In December of that year, while partying with Guns N' Roses Slash and Steven Adler in Los Angeles, Sixx overdosed on heroin and briefly died before being revived in the ambulance. The experience with twin life-saving adrenaline needles inspired him to write one of the group's biggest hits, 1989's Kickstart My Heart. As if Blink-182's ongoing indefinite hiatus hadn't made 2008 bad enough for Travis Barker, the legendary drummer nearly died when the Learjet 60 business jet he was traveling on crashed and burned following a failed aborted takeoff. After bursting out its tires, the plane ran past the runway, smashed through a boundary fence, crossed the highway, and then burst into flames on an embankment. 4 of the 6 people on board, including the pilot, died on the scene, and fellow passenger DJ AM died of an overdose the following year. Only Barker himself lives to tell the tale. Barker discussed the immediate aftermath of the crash on the Joe Rogan Experience in early 2019.
I was in such a hurry to get out of the plane and exit the plane, I jumped right into the jet, which is full of fuel. So my whole body lit up.
It's hard to be much more self-destructive than the members of Guns N' Roses were at the height of their popularity in the early 90s. And top-hatted guitar hero Slash is arguably the most infamous addict in the band, consisting almost entirely of infamous addicts, any one of whom could have easily died during their heyday. Just ask bassist Duff McKagan, whose pancreas exploded due to alcohol abuse, or drummer Steven Adler, whose addictions nearly killed him with a stroke. While touring in support of the Use Your Illusion double album, Slash bought every bit of a dealer's stash of heroin and retired to shoot it all up in his San Francisco hotel room. Speaking to The Guardian, Slash later recalled, "I started down the hallway and I ran into a maid and I asked where the elevator was and then bam, I collapsed." Slash flatlined and luckily was able to be revived by paramedics. What happened next probably isn't all that surprising. As Slash explains, "They took me to the hospital, but I said I'm fine, signed myself out, went back to the hotel, and we flew to the next gig." Rock stars encounter plenty of dangers during their lives, but routine knee surgery doesn't usually make the list. But Queens of the Stone Age frontman Josh Homme put it simply to NME, "I had surgery on my leg and there were complications and I died on the table. I was in bed for 3 months." Speaking to Rolling Stone, he went into even further detail. "I was stuck in a room for 4 months and I had all these tubes in my leg and it was painful." But being cleared by doctors and discharged wasn't the end of the ordeal. Homme still thinks the greatest challenge was the psychological damage he endured in the aftermath of his surgery. In his own words, "The physical scars heal quick, it's the mental ones that are tougher." However, Homme has since cited the ordeal as an experience that zeroed him, saying, "And I'm really thankful for it because I know it's important." Metallica's Wherever We May Roam tour comfortably overlapped with Guns N' Roses' Use Your Illusion tour, so the two titans decided to join forces for a handful of appearances at a number of American stadiums. Unfortunately, the tour is now widely seen as a catastrophe, largely due to the excesses and chronic tardiness of GNR's Axl Rose. The troubles came to a head on August 8, 1992, when Metallica frontman James Hetfield, confused about the stage layout, wandered right into a pyrotechnic blast during Fade to Black and was left with severe burns.
Pyro guy doesn't see me that I've walked back out there. A big colored flame goes right up under me.
The band cut the set short as James was rushed to the hospital, but the story gets even crazier. Tour promoters frantically called Guns management, who agreed to start their set early to appease a disappointed crowd. However, citing a failure to properly switch over the sound settings, Rose cut the set early and caused a massive riot. As Hetfield later said, "I go and light myself on fire and he upstages me." Texas Groove Titans Pantera may have almost single-handedly kept metal alive in the 90s, but it came at the cost of some members' own well-being. To this day, fans remain heartbroken over Dimebag Darrell Abbott's onstage killing in 2004 and his brother Vinnie Paul's death from heart disease in 2018. But although many are aware that frontman Phil Anselmo battled heroin addiction in the latter half of the band's heyday, not everyone knows that he briefly died of an overdose. After a show in Dallas in 1996, Anselmo shot up, as was his routine, and promptly slipped into cardiac arrest for 4 to 5 minutes. He summarized the events in a press conference a few days after being discharged. The star said, "I, Philip H. Anselmo, injected a lethal dose of heroin into my arm and died for 4 to 5 minutes." Anselmo later told Endeavoro, "Make no mistake, I have died before. There's no faking death." Interestingly, Anselmo's back problems were the cause of both his addiction and his recovery. When he finally found time to undergo surgery in 2005, he had to kick the habit before going under. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. He's been sober ever since. British pop metal pioneers Def Leppard are known as much for their one-armed drummer as they are for their decade-defining hit songs. But just how did Rick Allen lose his arm? On New Year's Eve 1984, Allen was driving his girlfriend around the outskirts of his native Sheffield when he lost control of his Corvette. The car then smashed into a field and launched Allen from the driver's seat, severing his left arm and leaving his girlfriend with severe whiplash and a handful of broken bones. Doctors did manage to reattach the arm, but an infection forced them to amputate it for good. But the story of how Allen overcame his condition is even more remarkable than the incident itself.
When I finally came round after my accident, I was sort of saying to her, "It's okay, you know, things will be fine, don't worry about it."
Unwilling to consider retiring from one of music's then biggest acts, Allen built a drum set in which parts normally played by the left arm would be played by the left foot.
He'd been practicing on the edge of the bed with a pillow. He said, "Well, I've lost my left arm, so I'm going to use my left foot."
Allen went on to master the custom-built kit in time for the band's 1987 Titanic hit single-packed album Hysteria, and the rest is history. Rock fans might remember Creed vocalist Scott Stapp's bizarre 2014 mental breakdown in which he filmed himself in his truck hiding out from unspecified predators. It later came out that Stapp was enduring frightening hallucinations brought on by methamphetamine psychosis. Luckily, he got help and has been clean and sober ever since. But that was far from the first time he'd experienced a near brush with death. In a 2012 GQ interview, rapper T.I. recalled hearing pained moaning coming from a hotel balcony above him. He saw a wounded man attempting to continue his jump after the 6th floor broke his attempted 14-story drop. The man, who T.I. later realized was Creed's Scott Stapp, was spinning an intoxicated tale about how his girlfriend was cheating on him with his best friend. The rapper ultimately coaxed him down by offering him a joint in exchange for letting him call the authorities. Korn frontman Jonathan Davis has endured several health scares over the course of his life, and they started at a young age, too. As a kid, Davis suffered from severe asthma that landed him in the emergency room on a number of occasions. In a 2004 interview with Livewire, after stating that his upbringing had been pretty terrible, he was asked if there had been any good parts. Davis responded, just staying alive. I was really sick as a kid. I almost died. I don't know how many times. I was in and out of the hospital so many times with really bad asthma." Years later, Davis found himself back in the hospital. He later explained, "I started getting these weird bruises all over my body about 2 weeks ago. I was getting very weak after the shows, so I saw a doctor in London Friday. He took some blood tests, and when the results came in, they rushed me to the hospital." Davis, it turned out, was suffering from immune thrombocytopenic purpura. In his own words, ITP is a blood infection where, because of an allergic reaction I had to some medication, my blood platelets were really low. If I continued to headbang on stage, I could have had a brain hemorrhage and dropped dead on the spot.